On their new Panzer 38Ts, the Germans added radio equipment which they deemed necessary for proper tank use. Usually, the company commander's tank was equipped with an Fu-5 transmitter and Fu-2 radio receiver. The platoon leader's tank had the Fu-5 and ordinary tanks were equipped with only Fu-2 radio sets. The Panzer 38T had a few different command vehicle versions known as Panzerbefehlswagen. These were built in 3 different versions: the SDKFZ 266, 267 and 268. The SDKFZ 266 version was equipped with an Fu-5 and a Fu-2 radio and used a rod-type antenna. The last version, the SDKFZ 268, used the Fu-7 and Fu-5 radio equipment with 2 rod antennas. The SDKFZ 268's main purpose was to communicate with German Air Force units for better cooperation. When modified to be used as a command vehicle, the whole machine gun had to be removed, and in its place a round armored cover was added. For crew protection against infantry attack, 2 more MP-38 submachine guns were added. A number of Panzer 38T Ausf.A's were modified for this role. The Ausf.A's that were used in Poland had a larger aerial on the left side of the superstructure. While not present on all Ausf.A vehicles, the use of this antenna was abandoned after the Polish campaign. The main center where all these modifications were conducted was the Signal Ordnance Depot at Berlin-Schonenberg. The command version based on the Panzer 38T was not popular with its crews as it lacked an adequate view of its surroundings. While the Panzer III was far more preferable for this role, due to a lack of tanks in the early stages of the war, the Panzer 38T was used instead. By the time of the invasion of Poland in September 1939, there were some 57 Panzer 38Ts allocated to Panzerabteilung 67, which was part of the 3rd Leichte Division. This battalion was divided into 3 companies with 4 platoons each. While it was originally intended to equip these companies purely with the Panzer 38T, due to a lack of tanks this was not possible. For this reason, Panzerabteilung 67 was instead also issued with the rare Panzer II Ausf D tanks. The 3rd Light Division was allocated to Army Group South, which was under direct command of General Colonel von Rundstedt. The 3rd Light Division engaged Polish positions near Częstochowa and managed to break through the line. It lost its first Panzer 38T tank on the 6th of September 1939, when it was hit by a Polish 3.7 cm anti-tank gun. In the following days, the 3rd Light Division clashed with many Polish forces, until it reached Góra Kalwaria, just south of the Polish capital of Warsaw. It also participated in the German attempt to stop the Polish counterattack near the Bzura River, which was successfully repelled. The last combat action in Poland was during the siege of Modlin. By the end of the Polish campaign, only around 7 vehicles were lost, but all were recovered and put back into action. During this campaign, the Panzer 38T performed well, with minimal equipment and mechanical breakdowns. But, like all German tanks, the Panzer 38T was also lacking adequate armor protection. The Polish anti-tank guns could penetrate its frontal armor at up to 300-meter ranges, and the anti-tank rifles at up to 100 meters. Interestingly, during the Polish campaigns, the Germans tested the idea of using trucks to transport the Panzer 38T, hoping that this way they would be able to advance more quickly. This likely proved to be impractical and was abandoned and never used after Poland. After the Polish campaign, the light divisions were reorganized in the proper Panzer divisions. The 3rd Light Division was renamed to the 8th Panzer Division in October 1939. Due to the increased production of the Panzer 38T Ausf.A and Ausf.B, it was possible to equip 2 Panzer regiments, the 10th and the 25th. The Panzer regiments consisted of 3 battalions. Each battalion was further divided into 2 15-vehicle companies, in total some 90 vehicles. But despite increased production of the Panzer 38T, insufficient tanks had been produced to fully equip these units by the time of the German invasion of the West. The 7th Panzer Division had, at the start of the campaign, some 91 Panzer 38Ts, with 10 additional command vehicles based on this tank. The 8th Panzer Division was a bit larger, with 116 Panzer 38Ts and 15 command tanks. When the Germans attacked in May 1940, both of these panzer divisions were part of General von Rundstedt's Armee Gruppe A. The 7th Panzer Division, which was under the command of Erwin Rommel, made quick progress and, by 14th May, crossed the Maas River. After that, it successfully engaged the French 1st Tank Division, which had Char B-1 bis and H-35 tanks. The 7th Panzer Division crossed the French border on 16th May and, 2 days later, managed to inflict heavy losses on the French 1st Light Division. By the 20th, it had reached the Arras area, where the British 4th and 7th Tank Regiments were holding the line. These units were equipped with Matilda tanks, which were immune to the Panzer 38T's 3.7cm gun. While British tanks initially caused panic among the German units, the use of artillery, air support and 88mm guns allowed the Germans to regain the initiative. The British lost some 46 tanks, while the Germans lost only 6 Panzer 38Ts. By 12th June, this division managed to cut off and force the surrender of the French 9th Corps near Abbeville. The last combat action of this unit in the west took place 6 days later while engaging British forces at Cherbourg. Meanwhile, the 8th Panzer Division supported the 19th Tank Corps, which was under the command of General Guderian. This corps made rapid progress through the Allied line and, by the 25th of May, reached Saint-Omer, which is only 40 kilometers south from Dunkirk. By the end of May, the 7th Panzer Division reported 18 heavy and some 295 enemy light tanks destroyed, with 20 Panzer 38Ts being lost. In total, both divisions lost some 54 Panzer 38T tanks, but the majority could be repaired and put back into action. The Panzer 38T tank's good performance in the west could be considered somewhat ironic considering its origin. It was the Czechoslovak revenge for handing their country over to the mercy of the Germans during the Munich Agreement. The 8th Panzer Division saw action during the Axis War with the Kingdom of Yugoslavia in April 1941. During this operation, the 8th Panzer Division was part of the 56th Motorized Corps that attacked from Hungary. After the short campaign that lasted less than 2 weeks, the division reported the loss of 7 Panzer 38Ts. For the upcoming invasion of the Soviet Union, thanks to the increased number of Panzer 38Ts, there were 3 more Panzer divisions equipped with this vehicle, besides the ones used in France. The total Panzer 38T and command vehicle strengths of these divisions on the 22nd of June 1941 were as follows. The 7th Panzer Division had 166 tanks and 7 command vehicles. The 8th had 118 with 7, the 12th 109 with 8, the 19th 116 with 11, and the 20th had 116 vehicles and only 2 command vehicles. At this point, due to the introduction of an additional version of this vehicle, tracking the Ausf.A is difficult, as the sources usually refer to all variants simply as the Panzer 38T without mentioning the precise version. Prior to Operation Barbarossa, in order to reduce reliance on fuel supply convoys and to increase operational range, the Panzer 38T were to be equipped with 200-liter towed fuel trailers. In addition, a transfer pump system was also provided. As the use of this trailer could be dangerous in combat situations, a quick-release tow hitch, which could be activated from inside the vehicle, was added to the rear. This proved to be awkward and vulnerable to enemy fire, which would lead to its withdrawal from further use. The Panzer 38T, like all German equipment in the Soviet Union until the end of 1942, suffered heavily. For example, the 7th Panzer Division had lost some 176 vehicles by the start of 1942. Some 98 were lost as a consequence of enemy fire, 1 was captured, 52 had to be blown up due to a lack of fuel, spare parts or breakdowns, and some 25 had to be returned to Germany for extensive repairs. In early 1942, the Panzer 38T was to equip the new 22nd Panzer Division, while those on the front lines were reorganized. Due to losses, the 6th and 7th Panzer Divisions were brought back to the west for rebuilding. The surviving Panzer 38Ts from the 7th Panzer Division were used to reinforce the 1st and 2nd Panzer Divisions. The 12th was re-equipped with newer Panzer III tanks, while the 8th, 19th and 20th Panzer Divisions still had this tank in their inventory. During 1942, the Germans also sold over 100 Panzer 38Ts to their Hungarian allies. While the Panzer 38T was a quite good tank in the early years of the war, by 1942, due to its weak armor and armament, its days as a frontline combat tank were at an end. It proved to be no match for the newer Soviet T-34 and KV series tanks. This could be clearly seen in a report of the 1st Panzer Division dated from early April 1942. Panzers are knocked out by T-34s at ranges of 200 to 800 meters. The Panzer 38T can't destroy or repulse a T-34 at these ranges. Because of its gun, the T-34 can knock out an attacking Panzer at long range. The Panzer 38T's 3.7cm gun was ineffective against the thick and sloped armor of the Soviet tanks. In rare cases, there were instances when the Panzer 38T managed to destroy a Soviet T-34 tank. One such occasion involved a Hungarian-operated Panzer 38T. This event took place during the combined German and Hungarian attack on the Soviet position as Storojevoye. During the combined German and Hungarian attack on the Soviet positions at Storojevoye. During the fighting, a T-38, as the Panzer 38T was called in Hungarian service, commanded by Sergeant János Gzsizsmádia, came across a T-34 that was attacking the German rear positions. Sergeant János reacted quickly and fired at the T-34 at close range. The T-38's 3.7cm armor-piercing round managed to pierce the T-34's rear armor and the tank exploded. From 1942 on, it was obvious to the Germans that the Panzer 38T was becoming obsolete as a main frontline combat vehicle. For this reason, most Panzer 38Ts were being retired from service and reallocated to secondary duties. Over 351 turrets taken from this tank were used as stationary bunkers all around occupied Europe. Other vehicles were reused as training tanks, put on trains, or even as ammunition vehicles. While the sources do not mention the precise versions of these modifications, some were probably also of the Ausf.A version. As the Panzer 38T proved to have outstanding performance, it was heavily used by the Germans for many modifications during the war, but probably the most well known are the tank hunters. During the war, the Germans supplied their allies with a number of different weapons and tanks. These included the Panzer 38T. During the attempt to rearm their Romanian allies in March 1943, some 50 Panzer 38T Ausf.A, B and C, known as T-38s in Romanian service, were given to Romania. These were then used by the Romanians to fight the Soviets, but as these tanks were obviously obsolete, they performed poorly against Soviet armor. Nevertheless, some survived up to August 1944, when Romania switched sides and joined the Soviets and began attacking German units. The last 3 T-38s were lost during the fighting for the crossing of the Hron River in March 1945. Despite not being German-built, the Panzer 38T played a greater role in the Panzer divisions during the first years of the war. It was far superior to the German Panzer I and II tanks and was available in sufficient numbers to equip several Panzer divisions by 1941. While its effectiveness as a frontline combat tank diminished during the invasion of the Soviet Union, its service did not end there. While most were withdrawn from front lines and allocated to secondary duties, several continued to see combat for some time afterwards. But the most useful feature of the Panzer 38T was its chassis, which was used extensively by the Germans up to the war's end. That's all for this video. Make sure to follow our website, we'll be releasing new articles on the regular. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram or Reddit, and if you use Discord there's a link to our community server in the description. Also, likes, comments and subscriptions on YouTube are greatly appreciated. If you would like to help us continue to develop and expand, also consider donating on Patreon or PayPal. All of the funds will be used to help us enhance and design new articles and features for you. Until next time, keep us in your sights.